Okay, AP Stats. This video is going to focus on how we choose measures of center and spread based on shape. So the first question I always get when we start talking about this is, why does it matter which measure of center and spread I use based on the shape? Well, let me try to explain this to you. Okay, if we have a nice, tidy little symmetric distribution, just like this, it's pretty easy to tell where the center of the data is because it's roughly the center of the picture. It just doesn't always work like that. So here's the deal. At that place right there, the mean as a measure of center, and you're familiar with what the mean is, it's the average, okay? And we know how to take the average, don't we? We take a bunch of numbers, let's say we've got like 5 numbers, okay? Let's say we've got 5 numbers. Let's say we've got 60, 62, I wanted to go up, 75, 83, and 100, okay? So let's look at those numbers. If I average all of those numbers, I will get a value that is the sum of those 5 numbers divided by 5, right? I mean, we all know how to take an average. So when I take the average, I'm going to get a specific value. But when I look at the median, I want you to look at what happens when I look at the median. We find the median mathematically by putting all the numbers in numerical order and then picking the physical middle one. So this right here would be my median. I don't have to do any calculations for that. Okay, so what I want to ask you is this. Let's say I change one of the numbers, all right? Let's say I change this 60 right here, and I tell you it's now 25. 25 is much lower than 62, the next lowest number. So when I take the average now, will that average be vastly different from what it was before? Yes, because 25 is extremely lower than 60 was. But will the median change? No, the median will not change because the median has to do with position of number, not calculating the average. So when you have a nice symmetric set of data like you have right here, then the mean and median are roughly the same. But what happens when you have a situation like this, let's say you've got a set of data that's skewed to the right. Now you've got some values down here that are more extreme than the majority of your data. So what happens is that when you calculate the average of this, that average tends to move farther to the right, okay? So the average tends to be, it gets pulled by those extreme values, whereas the median, it's going to stay about right here. Oh, did I just erase all that? It's going to stay with the center of the data because those extreme values are not going to affect it. So, bottom line, when you have a symmetric distribution, you are always going to report the mean as the measure of center, and you are always going to report the standard deviation as the measure of spread. Now, both of these have mathematical equations, but you're never ever going to be asked to write those out. And even if you had to, they're on the formula chart that College Board gives you for your test. So x bar is how we refer to the mean, and s sub x is how we refer to the standard deviation. You do have to understand that notation. Okay, so when you're talking about the mean, you're dealing with a symmetric distribution, and the measure of spread you always use with the mean is the standard deviation. Those two are married together. Okay, so what do you do when you have a non-symmetric distribution? Well, because the median is resistant to extreme values, we want to use the median as the measure of spread or center when we're dealing with a non-symmetric distribution. And what value for spread or variability always goes with it? The IQR. And the way we find the IQR, it is Q3 minus Q1. Q3 is the third quartile and Q1 is the first quartile. So you have to have those values to calculate the IQR. So keep that in mind. Okay, some students have a lot of trouble keeping these separate. So you have to kind of, in your mind, solidify this idea of, okay, if I'm going to say that this distribution appears symmetric, I have to talk about the mean as the center and the standard deviation as the spread. But if I'm looking at a distribution and I say, you know, that looks a little non-symmetrical, it looks a little skewed to the right or skewed to the left or something like that, then the most accurate measure of center is going to be the median, and then I'm going to talk about the IQR as being the measure of spread. Now, what a lot of students struggle with, they think that because we're reporting one center and spread, that it doesn't have the other value. Well, that's not true, because I can calculate a mean and median for any set of data. I can calculate both of them. It's just one of them is more representative of my data than the other one. So I'm choosing the one that represents my data correctly. That is how we decide on a measure of center and spread. Yay!